and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 389, and today's date is June 12th, 2014. And the title of this episode is Central Bankers Are Planning a Kinetic Strike to Protect the Dollar Collapse. And we can see what is going on. The Middle East completely falling apart, and the central bankers realize it. They are worried. They're worried that these people in these countries are going to take back their country, remove the private Western Central Bank, and sell their oil without using the dollar. And this is their fear. They want to keep this dollar propped up long enough to start some type of war. If these people in Libya, in Iraq, in Yemen actually take over these countries, remove the puppet regimes, get rid of the private Western central banks, and sell the oil in these countries not using the U.S. dollar, the dollar is doomed, and they know it. And the United States, the people in the United States are going to turn to the Fed, to the central bankers, to the government and say, you caused this. And this is their biggest fear. This is what they are worried about. This is why they've been going around the world spreading the empire of the United States thinner and thinner to keep this system alive. And they know it's coming down. They know they can't keep it going for much longer. And they know they need to start something. So everything is not blamed on them. And this is a perfect example. I mean, they could just sit there and say, you know what? Let the people in Iraq just take back the country. Who cares anymore? But they're not going to let this happen because they know that this would start something, and it would be a chain reaction, and the dollar would implode. So you can see from their actions, they are worried. They're worried about this collapsing, and they don't want this system to collapse just yet until they actually get something started, and that is war. And they'll need an event coming up very, very soon because they realize it's completely falling apart, and Ukraine is not any better, and they couldn't get into Venezuela. They're in Central Africa fighting those battles, and it's not going as planned, and it's actually getting worse. It's slipping through their fingers. And you have to remember, they're setting everything up for after the war to be in control, to reset the system. This is why Common Core is being put into place. This is why they're getting rid of all the rights. At least that's what they believe. They're getting rid of the rights of the people. This is why they're putting you into fenced locations to say, listen, you want to talk freely? You can go into this little caged-in area and you can speak over there. Let's get rid of the guns from all the people. Let's have all these mass shooting. Let's ramp it up. Let's get this going because the entire system is collapsing, and we're having warnings from the World Bank and IMF telling everyone that, yes, something is wrong. The entire system is about to come down. Let's get into this economic collapse news here. And we've been talking a lot about unemployment. We've been talking a lot about real estate. We've been talking a lot about retail. And it's all starting to come together now. And like I said, after this summertime, I mean, this is the hot season for real estate. I mean, after this summer, we're going to see major, major changes. I'm telling you, this year is starting to mimic 2008. And of course, when everything starts to fall apart, it is going to be a lot worse than 2008. I'm talking extremely worse because you have to remember, in 2008, people had jobs. They had income coming in. They had equity in their homes before the crash. Here, things didn't recover. 38% of Americans have lost their wealth or have unemployment around 30 to 37%. People are underemployed. They can't get the jobs that they had before. They can't bring in the money, and it's going to be much, much more difficult. There are still a lot of foreclosures on the bank's books. The Fed just bought all that up. That's all laying in their book, about $4 trillion worth. So you can see what's going on here. Countries right now are completely dumping treasury bonds. They're removing the dollar from the reserves. China, Russia, and many other nations are completely bypassing the dollar at this time. And here in America, what are we seeing? We're seeing that initial claims have risen again. This is the second week in a row, and of course, the corporate media is out there saying, "Oh, look, everything's staying steady. Don't worry. It looks like things are going to be getting better as we go throughout the year." We see the first quarter of GDP being downgraded now, revised, and now all of a sudden, Goldman, J.P. Morgan Chase, and many other financial institutions are downgrading the second quarter GDP, and it looks like we are not headed in the right direction whatsoever. And what we're seeing right now is the retail sales in May completely missed expectations. The surge that they talked about for the rest of the year is never going to happen because the government officials love to tell you, and of course the IMF likes to tell you this, the World Bank loves to tell you this, they love to tell you that things are going to be okay, don't worry, keep believing in the illusion, and they're telling us that this rest of the year is going to be incredible. We're going to see incredible growth. Unemployment is going to go way, way down, and we know for a fact it's not going to happen. Right now, in May, the retail sales mix expectations of 0.6% increase, printing at around 0.3%, with the entire positive print due to auto and gas sales. And if we actually break this down of what actually happened in retail, it doesn't look good. It looks like we're pretty much at a 0% gain at this time. But if we break it down and we look further into retail sales, we see like electronic and appliance stores down minus 0.3%. We see health and personal care stores down by 0.1%, negative 0.1%. Clothing and clothing accessories minus 0.6%. Sporting goods minus 0.1%. General merchandise stores, department stores, the big stores, down negative 1.4%. Miscellaneous store retailers down 1.8%. And this goes on and on and on, and it is not looking good at all. It is actually getting worse. And they really can't blame this on the weather. I mean, we are in spring going into summer. The weather is out of it. It's not even a factor anymore, and things are getting worse. So if we look at what's going on in real estate right now, and I've been talking about real estate for quite a while. I mean, I was going back to, I've been doing this for quite a while, and if we go back to 2013 in August, I've been saying there was something wrong with the real estate then. Even though the president, the Fed, and everyone else was telling us that real estate was fine, I was saying that real estate was heading in the opposite direction, and this is why we saw mortgage companies, mortgage departments laying off thousands upon thousands of people, because they already knew what was coming. They always know far in advance. They knew that real estate wasn't going to make it, that this was propped up by hedge fund and investments pumping the market up. This is why they didn't need the employees inside the mortgage departments to process mortgage applications, because they knew everyday Americans, they weren't buying the homes. Nobody has jobs. Nobody has the savings anymore. Nobody really wants to go out and buy a house at this time. And this is completely all over the country. Yes, there are pockets, places that are doing very well, and then there are other places that are actually doing much, much worse. But Bank of America right now, they are out there and they've done their calculations and they're looking, and they see a slowdown in national home prices coming very soon. Really? Wow, they're really giving us this information. Well, we already know this. We already know that we're at the top and prices are starting to come down. And this reminds me of 2008, where they're saying, yes, we saw a little dip in home prices, but don't worry, things are going to start recovering very soon, because we never saw real estate go down before. And here we are again. Here in 2014, we hit the top. And we're seeing prices starting to slowly come down. Actually, we're seeing a lot of people who are selling their houses. This is the hot time of the season where they're having trouble selling their houses, where they're selling them and they're dropping it down. Instead of $700,000, we're going to bring it down to $697. And then again, oh, let's bring this down to $685, and they're slowly bringing it down. And what they're doing is they're chasing the market at this time. Now, the IMF is out there, and the World Bank, and they've issued warnings about the global economy. The International Monetary Fund warned that the world must act to contain the risk of another devastating housing crash. The The World Bank warned that the anticipated rise in interest rates will hit global growth this year and presumably house prices too. The data shows an acceleration in house prices in many countries from already high levels has emerged as one of the major threats to global economic stability. In the wake of global recession, central bankers have cut interest rates to record lows, pushing house prices to levels that the IMF regards as a significant risk to many economies. The World Bank chief economist is offering important advice to investors and savers when he said that now is the time to prepare for the next crisis. Let's just put this in perspective. Right now, housing is completely falling apart. I mean, we understand that mortgage originations are down by 66%. People aren't refinancing. They're laying off thousands upon thousands of people in the mortgage department. Mortgage companies are actually closing down and going out of business. Now, let's just say interest rates start to rise. They start to push it up. Didn't we see this in 2008 when they pushed the interest rates up? What happened? It fell apart. The same thing's going to happen now, but this is going to be a catastrophe. It's going to be something that we have never, ever seen before. And they're looking at this and they're saying, yes, something bad is coming. And of course, we already know this. We've been preparing for this. We're already ahead of the game. And if we really look, we can see that the people out there who are in stock market are starting to cash in and keep a boatload of cash at this time. And what we're seeing is that the average cash position right now is up from 26% in 2012 to 36% at this time. Why is everyone going and moving into cash? Well, according to Suzanne Duncan, head of research at the Center for Applied Research, investors are haunted by the 2008 market crash. Investors are expecting a market crash, potentially another financial crisis, she says. While the baby boomers, ages 49 to 67, they have about 41% of their money in cash. Generation X, which is about 33 to 48, and the millennials under 33, they're holding about 40% of their investments in cash right now because they are very worried. People are getting out of the market at this time. They're keeping and hoarding cash. And I'm going to say right now, hoarding cash might be great right now, but when the dollar starts to devalue and other countries start to remove it from the reserves at a fast rate, the dollar is going to lose value very quickly, and you'll just be holding on to pieces of paper. Yes, it's a good idea to keep some cash in the house, but I would put it into hard assets at this time. This is what I'm doing. I do not sell gold or silver or anything like that whatsoever. I do this for my family. I'm prepared. I want a lot of my assets, and an asset that's been around for thousands upon thousands of years. It's a universal asset that everyone recognizes. It's gold and silver, and I continually do it. As the price goes down, I buy more, and I hold on to it. It's physical. I do not sell it. That is my insurance policy on wealth. And I also continually bring in food, water, medical supplies, because I realize as the dollar is devaluing and things start to get very, very expensive, I need a way to feed my family, to have them have water, and as things completely fall apart, I need to make sure that my family, my children, are safe, they have food. We're locked down because of people who weren't prepared, running around looking for all this and trying to prepare themselves. And it's a little too late at that time because everyone is thinking the same thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, those who are prepared compared to those who are not prepared is disproportionate right now. And you're going to see a lot of people running around in desperation looking for these supplies when everything starts to fall apart. Now, the Bank of France Governor Christian Noyer said the U.S. investigation into BNP's dealings with sanctioned nations may encourage companies to stop using dollars in international transactions at the time. We could say that companies would have maximum interest to do the most possible transactions in other currencies and pretty much move away from the dollar at this time. So you can see the thought process in many companies, in many countries. They're all thinking it. They just haven't done it yet. They're thinking, you know what? we see what's going on here. We see the sanctions. We see the dollar having trouble staying afloat here. It is in a downward trajectory at this time. A lot of countries are selling their treasuries. This is why the Fed has Belgium as their proxy, going out and purchasing the treasury bonds, or the ECB or someone inside Belgium doing this. It looks like they're still tapering here in the United States to give us that illusion that we're in a recovery. They have their proxies out there purchasing treasuries because they're trying to keep up with all the countries that are dumping the treasuries. They're trying to make sure that countries continually hold on to the US dollar. This is why they're going to go into Iraq somehow, some way. They're going to go into Libya, and they're going to try to keep this propped up. And if they can't, they're going to need to really move quickly to start an event so they're not blamed for this complete collapse. And right now, we see things are completely falling apart. Now, here's some good news for everyone. It looks like the government and police regularly use location data pulled off of a cell phone tower to put criminals in at the scenes of the crime, often without a warrant. Actually, most of the time they use no warrant whatsoever. Well, an appeals court ruled today that the practice is unconstitutional. In one of the strongest judicial defenses of technology privacy rights we've seen in a while, they said the police now need to get a warrant to get your information and to track you down using your cell phone. So that is a positive note until, of course, this judge is paid off or another judge is brought in that the NSA has been spying on to overturn this ruling. But we'll have to see how that goes and moves forward. We also understand the government is using this Vegas shooting at this time as a two-pronged approach, one for disarming the American people, the other is to demonize the movement. And when I say the movement, this is basically those people who are anti-government, if you like to call it that, or questioning the government. They like to call us domestic terrorists, homegrown extremists. And they're trying everything they possibly can now to paint this picture of what these type of people are like myself and everyone who's listening. And they're trying to make it look like this person, Gerard Miller, is that person. And now they even have him posing with Sheriff Mack, who was with the Bundy Ranch. And of course, Sheriff Mack was at many book signings, and people come up and say, let me take your picture, and this is exactly what happened here. He was at a book signing. This guy came up, they took the picture, and it looks like this was a complete setup. Just like at the Bundy Ranch, they had him standing out. They interviewed just him, Gerard Miller, and if you notice, all these pictures are starting to show up, and the government's saying, oh, he's anti-government, he's domestic terrorist, and we're seeing that this is their agenda right now because they realize that everything is falling apart. And let me just say, the whole world, the private Western Central Bank world, realizes that the debt of these countries cannot be sustained. The derivatives, the amount of derivatives cannot be sustained. All of this is going to fall apart, and they realize this. And right now, Boris Johnson is going to buy 3 water cannons for the Metropolitan Police in London right now. And they're purchasing, and they want these cannons in there right now because they believe that in this summer, there could be some type of civil disorder coming. Now, where does he get this information that something's going to go on this summer? Do they know something we don't? And then if you look even further, we understand that Eric Holder is starting up the task force to find those domestic terrorists, the homegrown extremists, and that just coincides with that the Nevada shooting, where they're using it to paint a picture of what a domestic terrorist, homegrown extremists, people who question the government look like, or what they're this is what they're painting right now and what people of this type look like. And then we also see that the Pentagon is preparing for mass civil breakdown. The U.S. Department of Defense research program is funding universities to model the dynamics, risks, and tipping points for large-scale civil unrest across the world. Wow, they must know something that we don't, or we pretty much know what's going on. It's all those other people that I'm worried about that really have no clue what's going on. Under the supervision of various U.S. military agencies, the multi-million-dollar program is designed to develop immediate and long-term warfighter relevant insights for senior officials and decision makers in the defense policy community and to inform policy implemented by combatant commands. So they are realizing that this cannot be sustained. This is why these policies have been pushed forward. They need to maintain control because they realize when the system falls apart, it's going to be crazy. This is why they created DHS. This is why DHS has been infiltrating all the local law enforcement. Right now, DHS is dormant. When they activate DHS, you're going to see a completely different side of DHS, and local law enforcement will all of a sudden go green. They'll have a green light, and they will be activated, and everything is about to change. Because what they're worried about is that when this whole system starts to come down, people can't afford food, people make a run on the supermarkets, people are breaking into homes, killing people just to get the merchandise that they need to survive. They understand that they will need to maintain control and control everyone while this happens. And this is why there are FEMA camps, because they're going to bring the majority, the most of the people as they possibly can to these camps, and the rest they're going to have to deal with. And this is why they're trying to disarm the American people. So it will make it easier for them to control the entire situation. Plus, they're very worried that these people, those people that understand that the government caused all of this, the bankers caused all of this. They're worried about their authority, their power, and they need DHS to control the people, and this is why they wanted them disarmed, because it would be much, much easier to control a disarmed population than an armed population. And we're going to see this come full steam ahead as time goes on. We can see countries are already getting ready for this. The United States is ready for this, because once we are no longer the reserve currency and the dollar collapses, this is when things go really crazy here in the United States. Now, out in Ukraine right now, Kiev's National Guard, they're a little ticked off. They're saying the government hasn't paid them. They haven't fed them. They've pretty much forgotten about them. And the Ukraine government has been using the National Guard conscripts as a major assault force in attacks on anti-Kiev forces in the east of the country. It is mostly the Guards, many of whom are the ultra-nationalist right sector movement. Now an entire unit of the National Guard has revolted and is heading back to Kiev, claiming they have been abandoned by the government and left unpaid. According to official papers, we don't exist. We're an illusion. It's like we've been deployed here. We haven't gotten any ammunition, nothing, claimed the commander of the 3rd Squadron. We haven't received any food. We've only received one check of about $600 US, and that was about 2 months ago. And they're pissed off, and they're heading back to Kiev. And you can see that things aren't going as well for the puppet regime in this area. But don't worry, they're continuing with the anti-terrorism forces. Actually, Russia right now is saying that the puppet regime, the anti-terrorism forces, are using banned weapons. Russia has accused the Ukraine of using prohibited weapons while attempting to retake the pro-Russian controlled city of Slavansk. Ukraine Defense Forces and nationalists are using prohibited weapons called incendiary devices, which are designed to start fires and were extensively used during the Vietnam War and are banned by the UN Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. So they are making their case, saying they've been using these weapons and they should not be using these weapons. But the paid mercenaries in these anti-terrorism forces do not care. The United States central bankers do not care, as long as they take control of the southeastern sections. That's all they want. You want your money, you better do this. And this is what's happening. Now, it looks like Putin and Poroshenko, they've been talking on the telephone about peace. The Ukrainian president has informed Putin about his plan to settle the situation in southeastern Ukraine, he said. Moscow does not believe it is time to send peacekeepers into Ukraine. Russian Foreign Chief Sergei Lavrov stressed everything is in the hands of Ukrainian authorities. We know that self-defense fighters in Ukraine East are ready for ceasefire, but according to all the rules, the first step must be done by the Ukrainian authorities now that Poroshenko's inauguration has taken place. And of course, they need to back off a little bit to show in good faith that they're going to not use force anymore, but they have not done this. And the southeastern people said if they pull back, we will reciprocate, but we're not seeing this at this time. Now, it looks like a Russian bomber flew very close to Alaska, about 50 miles off the California coast, and the United States scrambled its fighters, went after it, and of course it just turned back and went back to Russia, and nothing really happened. But, you know, the news is playing that up like, oh my God, Russia came very close, who knows what they were planning. And of course they just flew back. It was part of their mission, and they've seen this many, many times up in that area. Now, in Nigeria, the United States, Britain, and 5 other countries have set up an external intelligence response unit to fast-track the fight against Boko Haram. So now they are definitely making their move to try to get into Nigeria. They want to bring armed forces into this area. Why? Because China is there. China is in many countries in Central Africa. Wherever China is, that's where the United States has to be. And you can see that they're trying to do everything possible to get into Nigeria. They have troops in Chad, which is bordering Nigeria, so it makes it very easy for them to sneak right on over once they get everything established, and they convince the Nigerian government to let the United States central bankers into the country to help find the made-up Boko Haram crisis. And this is what they're doing. Now, the Washington Post is out there, and they're saying the U.S. administration recognizes the growing threat in the Middle East and that everything is starting to fall apart. And they do realize this. They understand they have lost control in the area, and they need to go and maintain control, and they're trying to figure out how to do this at this time, because they just can't bring in troops, because they told everyone around the world that we conquered these countries, now they have freedom, democracy, and the people are happy. Well, it doesn't look like the people are happy, does it? It looks like things are falling out of place, and people are saying, you know what? We don't want this puppet regime in here, and we want our country back. This is why we're fighting, and this is why we're going to take over, and you cannot stop us. And this is exactly what they're doing. Now, NATO Secretary General Rasmussen, he said on Thursday he didn't see a role for the organization in Iraq for NATO, but again, whatever they say is always the opposite. I'm sure they're making some type of plans, because NATO is meeting with Turkey right now about the state of emergency because what's happening in Iraq. And we can see that they are definitely planning something, building something up. And right now, the insurgents, the people of Iraq, have surrounded the Beiji refinery, and they're saying that it has been now taken over by the people of Iraq, and they do have control of it. I mean, there were reports going back and forth saying, no, they don't have control. Yesterday I said they have control, and it looks like they pretty much have control of the refinery at this time. Now, the United States is looking to send some help to Iraq. We understand F-16s are coming in. We understand Hellfire missiles are coming in. They have a lot of other military assets pouring into Iraq. Military advisors are coming in, and it looks like they're sending military equipment emergency for Iraq worth of $15 billion. They're trying to get that into there very quickly. Obama is out there, and he's saying that he is ready for a kinetic support to take some type of action in Iraq. He'll use kinetic support, which is pretty much going to war in Iraq again. I mean, kinetic support. I mean, I love these terms that they love to make up so they don't have to say war, that we're using our military to bring in troops into the area. Obama says, I don't rule out anything when it comes to helping Iraq deal with insurgents. Obama says, U.S. has an interest in making sure jihadists don't gain a foothold in Iraq. Obama says there will be short-term immediate actions that need to be done militarily in Iraq. U.S. officials looking at all options. Obama says Iraq clearly is an emergency situation. The Obama administration said not considering ground troops in Iraq. I'm going to switch that around. They are considering it, but they're not going to report on it just yet until it's much, much later, and they already have troops there. Obama says U.S. is prepared to take military action when its national security interests are threatened. Let's see. Obama says U.S. is prepared to take military action when its national security interests are... Which national security interests in Iraq? What are we worrying about here? Oh, that's right. The central bank and the oil ports and the refineries. That's what they're worried about. They're worried about the U.S. dollar. They're worried about these people taking control of the country and selling the oil, not using the U.S. dollar. This is what they're really worried about. France says international community must deal with Iraq situation urgently. France says jihadist surge puts territorial unity of Iraq in doubt and is major risk for regional stability. France says international community must deal with Iraq situation urgently. They realize what's happening, and their reports are coming in that about 4,000 troops have arrived in Baghdad in an advisory position. 3,000 troops arrived in the city of, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Soleimania, and we can see that they are building up quietly troops within Iraq. Of course, they're saying, oh no, they're only down there as an advisory role, but we know for a fact this advisory role switches over to a military defense role, and a role where they're going to use them to push these people back, and this is what they're doing right now. Now, there is another warning out there saying that Al-Shabaab is ready to attack Western interests, and Somalia's al-Qaeda-linked al-Shabaab insurgents are planning further attacks in the Horn of Africa. Of course that's where they're going to do it, because that's where the United States wants to get into. They want these attacks, these international terrorists, to do something so they can say, we need to bring in the United States into these regions to control them because it's out of control. And you can see right now, this is exactly what they are doing and preparing for. And this goes on to say that al-Shabaab said the attack was also carried out in retaliation to Djibouti's hosting of the United States' biggest military base in Africa. And we have to remember that the United States signed a lease with Djibouti for about 10 years or so to maintain their bases. This is their launch pad into Central Africa, and this is why al-Shabaab is really pissed off, and this is why they're going to attack the Western interests. And we know this is all being ginned up so they can bring in the United States military into these regions wherever China is. They need a story, and they create one out of thin air, just like they did in Kenya with the mall attack. They needed somehow, some way to get into that area, because at the same time that was happening, Kenya was signing the deal with China to become the clearinghouse for the yuan/renminbi. And we can see they're doing the same thing. They create this crisis out of thin air so they can go in to these regions. And then we see what is happening around the world. The central bankers, the United States central bankers, are losing control of the situation. They realize this. They understand this. They realize they need to bring in more military assets to control this, because they do not want this collapse to occur before they get an event started. If they really wanted to create this collapse, they would just let it all go, and everyone would stop using the dollar, and the dollar would collapse. But you can see by their actions, this is not what they're doing. They're going in and they're maintaining what the reserve status of the dollar. And the only way to do this is to keep the dollar as the reserve currency on the oil in Iraq, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Yemen, to capture and control the countries in Central Africa, put their natural resources on the dollar, and this is exactly what they're doing at this time, and they're not going to stop because they do not want to be blamed for this collapse that is coming. It is imminent. It is going to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.